So I've often said that for the warfighter, right, the only thing that's not connected today is his boots, and they're working on that too. So there's IT, right? Everything is connected, and one of the panel's topics that was requested by our planning committee with representatives from each of the services was IT systems and data standards. So I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Alan Dianick to lead our final panel for the day.
Thank you. And since I don't have a gavel, I will use the phone because it's the only tool I have. I was told to factor that in. Okay. All right, I've also told to keep this close. So thank you very much for attending. What I'd like to do is thank my panel members. Mr. Juan Ramirez is going to speak to us on 5G, and he is the director of the 5G cross-functional team within the DoD CIO, and it's a congressionally mandated organization charged to accelerate the adoption of 5G. So also Mr. Jim Nelson, who up until recently was the Deputy Director of Cloud and Software Modernization. And I noted to him that this is the first time we've met in person. We've been on the phone lots, but this is one of those COVID holdouts that I finally got to meet one of my coworkers, so it's great. And finally, Mr. Tim Stark, who's a senior software engineer working in the Undersecretary of Research and Engineering software group, which happens to be my group. I'm the Director of Software Engineering I'm actually a colleague of Ms. Geyer and also Mr. Heafy in SCNA under our boss, Tom Sims, who spoke yesterday. So I want to thank everybody for attending. And without ado, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Ramirez.
Well, first, thank you everybody for dealing with me and this late in the afternoon. So I just want to say first, thank you very much. But I would also say that I like to give kudos to my team who is here. They are actually my SMEs. So if you have hard technical questions, I would say I'm the face, but they're the ones you really want to talk to. But thank you again. I'm hopeful that you guys get a lot out of this. And with that, let's just get started. So next chart, or did I just use the, perfect. I'm just a little tall. But okay, with that, let's get started. So what I want to do first is within DoD CIO, as most of you know, we start off with strategy and we try to figure out where can we actually place ourselves. For those of you who aren't familiar with DoD CIO, we just recently released our Fulcrum strategy. This is intended to provide a roadmap that outlines IT modernization objectives for the Department of Defense, and it's done so through 4 lines of effort. What I wanted to do here, though, is highlight for you 5G, and my other hat that I wear too for mobility and wireless falls under line of effort 1 and line of effort 2, and just kind of give you that bigger, broader picture as we start to get down into the weeds. Again, really, this is just intended to show you how we connect to the broader group. As I was briefly introduced, my name is Juan Ramirez. I am the director for the 5G cross-functional team. As was stated, we are a SecDef-empowered organization, and I say that because we're a little bit different. We're special, as I like to tell people. We are embedded in CIO, but we are comprised of multiple organizations. So we have representatives from R&E, ANS, the military departments, as well as DIU and Joint Staff. And the reason why I highlight that, and I'll kind of allude to this later as we talk about standards and standards development, is it enables us to pull together the SMEs from all of the organizations. So as we look at 5G and what our mission is, we're able to have a collective view of this. It's not just CIO directing something. It's not just Juan pushing for something. It's actually a cradle to grave representation of what the needs are within the military departments, developing strategies for them to acquire certain technologies and actually see that push through acquisition and sustainment. So kind of just keep that in the back of your head as we talk about standards and standards development. And I'm sure you've heard this theme already from some of our other groups, that it's a collective. It's not just one person or one organization driving it. It's actually the collective work of industry, partners within government, as well as within interagency partners. Specific to the 5G cross-functional team, our mission is 5G. What does that mean? And I'll jump right to that. We are responsible for the deployment and adoption of 5G within the department. when 5G, and I'm putting this in air quotes, I'm sure for those of you who follow the standards, you know it's been there for a while, but when 5G was actually put in the department back in 2021, it was done so with the pure mind of pure research and development. In fiscal year 24, it actually moved under CIO with the intent of operationalizing and actually putting the 5G things that we did, the studies, the use cases, putting those into sustainment and actually providing a path for the department to deploy 5G. So as we talk about 5G and our vision within the department, it's built under 3 lines of effort. And I'm going to kind of give you the top level view first of our vision and then kind of bring it down into how standards fit into this. With the first line of effort, we're focused on getting, it's okay. I know, I was like, I have short friends, so I'm used to kind of bending over a lot. Hey, got you guys to laugh. No, I stand taller now. But anyways, so 5G, 3 lines of effort, this is how we're gonna deploy it. The first line of effort is focused really on getting 5G infrastructure on public base or on military installations, focused on public infrastructure. What that really means to some folks is better Netflix, ensuring that as you pull out your phone, you actually have a 5G connection. This serves multiple paths, but it really sets the foundation for line of effort 2 and line of effort 3. Line of effort 2 focuses on expanding that 5G coverage, which is carried around the training centers, the housing units, and actually expanding 5G to up to 100% of the military base. Here you start to see the introduction of what 5G actually can do, either in public or private networks or in hybrid networks, focused on technologies that really address bespoke activities or needs from the department. Here, what we've done and what we've actually had previous studies and use cases are centered around smart warehouses, AR, VR capabilities, flight line of the future. And then really what we get excited about is getting into line of effort 3, where we're talking about the tactical application of 5G and what it actually means for the military user. I'm here focusing on private networks. Under line of effort 2 and line of effort 3, for those of you who follow, what we've seen in the NDAs, here we actually have the introduction of our Open RAN ecosystem. So those of you who are familiar with the different standards bodies, here ORAN Alliance is key for us. I bring line of effort 2 and line of effort 3 and kind of give you that overall picture because at the crux of this, you'll see that we have standards embedded here. And this is really where, as I like to say, I'm the face. I'm not the overall standards to me. I've only been here for a year, so I'm a newbie to this, but I'm excited. I'm learning a lot. But in 2020, there was a signed out memo by DoD CIO that directed CIO C3 specifically would be the lead for all standards and the engagement plan for 5G. So what I wanted to show you here was a representation of how we do international or how we do standard strategy within 5G and beyond within our department. Most of all, I'm pretty sure a lot of this is very familiar to you. I don't want to read the charts to you, but at a very high level, we gather the information, we do a gap analysis, and then we go through standards development. Here, what's key and what I want to draw your attention to, and kind of as I alluded to previously, we gather the information and the requirements strictly coming from the military departments. Within DoD CIO, and as we go into FY25, one of the things that I wanted to highlight too is what our priorities are as we're moving into the next fiscal year and as we look into the different releases within 3GPP. So what we're most concerned about, and as we have and tie it back to military application and military needs, are improving standards or doing contributions for Sidelink, for non-terrestrial networks, for IAB, as well as Spectrum. Can't get away from Spectrum, right? But what we're doing is we're actually working with the military departments, looking at those use cases that they have either developed or are working with them to flesh out the needs and looking at the technologies and seeing what gaps exist and working with industry to figure out what contributions can we push forward so that as we go forth and procure those technologies that are going to satisfy line of effort 2 or line of effort 3, that it has the standards already baked into it. So at a very high level, this is kind of our overall strategy for 5G standards and beyond and how we deploy within the department. And I'm flying through this fast. So if you have questions, I don't know if you want to wait till the end or just raise your hand to make this interactive. Here, what we want to do is show you, since 2020, we've been engaged with standards. We wanted to highlight DoD CIO is at the forefront of it. We try to engage other partners, specifically R&E and NSA, as well as working with DHS. We do partner with NSA to run a overall DoD-centric view of what standards and what contributions are going in through. While NSA focuses on security, we kind of focus on everything else, right? But with that, we wanted to show you here some of the specific organizations or standards bodies that we participate in. Very familiar, you'll see 3GPP, ADIS, and the ORAN Alliance. Since FY23, don't want to read it, but we wanted to show you here what we've done so far. Sometimes people ask, that's great, you have a vision, but actually show me what you've been able to do so far. And so again, in 23, this is what we've done. We hope to have an update in 24. And again, just a big shout out to my team and the folks who work within the CFT in C3I as well for the long hours that this requires. What we wanted to show you here was just the standard org chart from 5G to 6G evolution. 3GPP is ever going, it's ever changing, and so it's cyclical. As we're trying to wrap up our contributions for 5G advanced, we're already starting to look for the future and working with our R&E partners as well as the military departments to figure out where should we be looking at with regards to 6G, and also looking with industry and partnering with industry to figure out what can you back us up on? What are your priorities? Kind of tying those together and ensuring that we have a cohesive voice going forward. One of the things that I didn't address, which I'll go back here, is the way that we push forth contributions within DoD, it's by proxy. So we actually work with our industry and FFRDCs, academia, nonprofits to actually push our contributions forward. Forgot to mention that, sorry y'all. One of the things that we wanted to highlight though is an experiment that we're working with our NATO partners. So this experiment, IST 220, not sure how many of you are familiar with it, but this is an experiment that is designed to take a look at how we do standards development within the department, carry that forward through NATO, and actually develop a standard process that after the next 3 years can be adopted and actually take standards development, carry it to an international level, and then meet military application needs at the NATO level and actually have those standards baked into the contributions. This is something that's really exciting for us. It's something new for myself, but really what we see here now is it's no longer the department showing what our needs are, but it's taking, I have priorities A, B, and C, carrying them forward, working with our NATO partners to further streamline that down and decide which technologies are the most important. Sorry about that. I'm choking over here. Exciting. With that, the overall goal here is to come up with a harmonious set of standards that we can push forward. And really the process development, because we love processes, is detailed here. Overall goal, like I said, is to develop a STANEG. It's a standard application that'll go through the NATO process. It's a very long process that my colleague Luann could help educate you on. It's great, but it's also it's a process that is laborsome, but it's also showing the level of commitment that you have from the different NATO partners who are willing to actually come to the table and actually share what their needs are from their country or their nation perspective. You are amazing.
Yes, I.
She's very amazing. Everybody, a round of applause. Thank you. It's also my cue to try to hurry this faster so you guys can ask questions or we can get to happy hour. But anyways, what we wanted to show you here though is again how and where we fit within specifically IST 220. The overall goal again is to develop that STANEG that takes what our 3GPP contribution would be working with industry and carrying it through the process. And again, the overall goal by the end of the process is to actually have a contribution that we can push forward that will result in a new norm or a new process that we can build into the overall NATO process itself. What we see here is also part of the overall IST 220 process. It's a quarterly effort that's focused on really looking at use case baselines, doing that standard gap analysis. Again, it's very similar to what we showed you for the DoD process and just leveraging that and carrying it forward with our NATO partners. Here, our goal is to work horizontally across multiple existing NATO boards and committees and really finalize what that coordination process looks like. Again, so far it's worked out really well. We've had a lot of participation. We're seeing industry take an active role and working with us. And we're actually working with other Ministry of Defenses to ensure that we do have a harmonized activity push forward. Similar to what I told you earlier, what our priorities are, things that we're looking at now to push forward as a STANAG is contributions in 6G as well as spectrum. And there's one more, it'll come back to me in a little bit. So if I remember, I'll make sure I give you that shout out, but those are the 3 priorities that we're starting to see come about from some of the discussions that we've had most recently. With that, I flew through that really quick so that I can turn it over to my partners because I'm really excited to learn how you guys do standards, what new things you want to share with us. And thank you again to everybody. I look forward to hopefully answering your questions later.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jim Nelson. I am currently the Chief of Staff for Deputy CIO of Information Enterprise. So I have just recently moved over to that role. Previously, I was the Deputy Director for Cloud and Software Modernization for the DoD. We're responsible for, we were responsible for the 2018 cloud strategy. We have been integrated with the digital modernization strategy, and we have been trying to move the Department of Defense into the cloud for a very long time. I think we're getting really close to getting those folks in. So my new role has a fairly large portfolio. So not just cloud and software modernization, we also do mission partner environment. We do the DoDIN modernization activities, which is our DoD information network. So all of our kind of backhaul network connections, we are responsible for that. We also do defense business systems. So anything to do with financial management or kind of back office business systems, we're responsible for modernizing all of that activity across the department. We also are responsible for things like our enterprise architectures. So our IMA, our business mission area architectures, our team is responsible for doing that work. We also do enterprise licensing. So anytime that we can utilize the department's buying power to get a better price for the department, that's some of our teammates do that work. And we work very closely with Alan, who called me in at the last second. He said, "Oh, everybody else won't do it, so I need you." And I was like, "All right, I guess I'm the bottom of the barrel, so here I am." But we work with our software modernization SSG, so our senior steering group, to really drive software modernization and to get the department using modern software development practices such as DevSecOps. So that's been a huge push for us over the last few years. Okay. So our big push for cloud was to really get all of these sort of disparate cloud contracts integrated into two larger contracts. What we were seeing across the board was we just really didn't have visibility across the department on what we were doing in cloud. We didn't know who was using it. We didn't know how much we were spending in cloud. We didn't know why we were using cloud. We just told the department, go use cloud. And it was probably not the best strategy right out of the gate, right? We also worked really closely with the federal government, who was like, cloud first, everything goes into the cloud. And then federal government kind of changed their mind as well and said, well, let's do cloud smart. So we also adopted that and said, hey, listen, not everything is going to go to the cloud. So let's do a application rationalization. Let's really rationalize our portfolio systems and see what really needs to go into the cloud. So we spent a considerable amount of time building kind of our rationalization efforts and then really helping folks move into the cloud. And our first step was really setting policy for the foundation of cloud. So originally we had the 2018 cloud strategy that Mr. Dana Deasy, who is our DoD CIO at the time, developed. It really set the department on the path to cloud adoption. We went in whole scale, trying to put in an enterprise level contract. Some of you might remember JEDI. We were responsible for that. Goods, bads, uglies, we'll take the hit. But our office was responsible for trying to get JEDI into place. In between that, the digital modernization strategy came out. We were one of the, and if I'm talking too fast, or just stop me. We were, for the digital modernization strategy, we were goal number one. Really move the department into the cloud, use enterprise cloud contracts, and really get the department to get onto a modern capability. My colleague here also talked about the DoD Fulcrum strategy, just signed out in June. I have a slide for that as well. We'll probably skip over some of that, but we support the Fulcrum strategy. We have many of the goals and objectives in the Fulcrum strategy are aligned around cloud, mission partner environment, which we're working to move our mission partners into the cloud. We're working with NATO to get NATO into the cloud. So we're working very hard to get kind of everyone working in the same environment. In between that, we published our software modernization strategy. What we realized also early on was that cloud wasn't the end state, that having a modern infrastructure to build software was really where we were trying to go, and to have a modern platform for our systems. So we published the software modernization strategy a few years back. We built an implementation plan. We worked closely with our colleagues over in R&E and A&S to develop that strategy and the implementation plan. And I'll talk a little bit about that here soon. We also got to a point where we were ready to expand cloud beyond the United States. So we have spent a significant amount of time developing plans, pushing out capabilities to OCONUS to our warfighters on the ground where they need it, so that they are not having to jumped upon to get to their data. Currently now, all of our approved cloud service providers are all in the continental US. We've been working closely with them over the last couple of years to push that capability down to the edge. And I'll go over some of that as well. Let's see. I always want to say next slide. I don't have a slide pusher. So Fulcrum, we for cloud and information enterprise, so my entire portfolio, we're pretty much in every one of these lines of effort. So our job there is to really just support the warfighter. Again, I kind of touched upon it a little bit earlier, but mission partner environments, enterprise licensing, all of those types of things are all in the Fulcrum strategy. We are currently getting ready to kick off an effort to develop an implementation plan. First on the left side, my left, really all of these strategies feed into the Fulcrum strategy. And then also we have all of our individual supporting strategies to include our software modernization strategy that really support Fulcrum. So at the end of the day, this kind of pivot document is really there to support all the strategies that we already have in place since, probably 2016, 2017, we've been building these strategies and really saying, hey, this is the way we're going to do things in the department. So we've been working really hard on this one. A lot darker than I thought. Okay. On the left, you'll see software modernization strategy. We kind of kicked on that. First goal for the software modernization strategy is to accelerate the enterprise cloud environment. We really focused our attention on JWCC, which I'll touch on here shortly, Joint Warfighter Cloud Capability, which replaced JEDI. Our intent there was really to have full visibility over what we were doing in the cloud, be able to answer the questions that we get from Congress, such as how much does the department spend on AWS? Before we had JWCC, we really couldn't answer that question. We had to spend a lot of time doing data calls, reaching out to all the proponents. Please, please, please tell us what you're doing. We're getting to the point now where we're able to do this in an automated fashion, pull that data directly from the JWCC PMO office, and be able to answer those questions on the fly for leadership. So it's been a huge push for us in a very big effort. We've also spent a lot of time with our software factories development. We have over 50 software factories now in the Department of Defense that we're tracking, some better than others, but we're working on a maturity model for those software factories. And we spent a considerable amount of time kind of the coalition of the willing with our software factories. So every other month, I think it is now, we do a software modernization or software factory coalition meeting where all the software factories gather in a place. Last month or 2 months ago was in the Pentagon. Folks are really happy to come out and see kind of senior leaders. And our senior leaders really kind of got an eye-opening of what software factories actually provide to the department. And then finally, one of our big pushes for software modernization is the culture. Culture doesn't change as quickly as technology does. We can't get folks to really adopt the technology that we're pushing to them, especially things like DevSecOps, cloud. There's been a huge, I don't want to say pushback, but there's definitely a culture change across the department. Things like, how do we fund it? How do we purchase it? How do we track it? All of those things kind of come into play when we're trying to change the culture, which is really, really kind of set in the past. We are currently staffing and about to publish our cloud FinOps strategy. This is really about us obtaining visibility of our cloud spend across the department. We've got some pockets of excellence across the department. Army comes to mind. They have been doing and working with the FinOps Foundation for quite a few years. We basically stole what they are doing, incorporated into what the FinOps Foundation has put in place, and we are putting out our own DoD FinOps strategy to really get to get senior leaders to even understand what FinOps is, and B, to start developing those capabilities to have full visibility over our spend. So about a year ago, we awarded the Joint Warfighter Cloud capability. This was a really big milestone for the Department of Defense. Before then, we did not have an enterprise cloud contract for folks to use the cloud. We awarded it to the 4 hyperscale CSPs, and you can see them on the bottom here: AWS, Microsoft, Google, and Oracle. Really, this was an attempt by the department to harness the power of all 4 of these CSPs to provide ease of use, global accessibility. I won't read all of these for you, but some of the things that are provided through JWCC and nowhere else are things like the tactical edge capabilities. So there are the CSPs are developing tactical edge devices. Some of these are as small as that can fit in your backpack, even smaller, all the way up to a mobile data trailer that goes on an 18-wheeler. All of those are only available to the JWCC contract, and we've negotiated that. We've also made a huge change with JWCC where we go direct to the CSPs from the government. Before, we were having to go through third-party integrators for most of our cloud buy. So now we were able to contract directly with the CSPs, which means that they sort of answer to us when we have an issue. So when there is a vulnerability or there is an issue with cloud, we can go directly to the CSPs and say, what are you going to do to fix it? So we've worked really hard to build that relationship with them. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. The other thing that we did, in between awarding this kind of large enterprise contract is that we've been working with the federal government on FedRAMP. So FedRAMP is the program that approves and certifies cloud services, right? On top of that, we also have a DISA provisional authorization. So once FedRAMP is approved, then they come to us, we get a sponsor, we work through DISA to get a provisional authorization, which means they've gone through a little bit more rigorous review and assessment. Once that assessment is complete, we provide a provisional authorization, and then folks in DoD can use the services. It's been a pretty good process so far. We know that there's a lot of changes going on with FedRAMP. Part of our DoD CIO office and our cybersecurity team is on the FedRAMP JAB board, and we work closely with those guys. So on top of JWCC, we also found out that we found this pretty quickly, was that just having a contract wasn't going to be enough. What we needed to do was provide an environment, provide migration services, provide things that you can use while you're in the cloud. We, over the last, I would say 4 years, we have built, created, deployed cloud service management offices across the department. So each of the services have their own cloud service management office. So the Air Force has Cloud One, Navy Neptune for our Dawn and Marine Corps. We have the Enterprise Cloud Management Agency, ECMA, with the Army. And we also recently stood up the DISA HAC Hybrid Cloud Office. Their job is really to help mission owners get into the cloud. They've put in automated tools to help with the contracting portion of that. So we have contracting, we have provisioning. So we have automated tools for all of that. We've also provided a ton of stuff for as a service capabilities, so container as a service, compliance as code. Vulcan is the DISA software factory, and that has been up and running for quite some time. And then we provide other capabilities such as infrastructure as code, which helps our mission partners, mission owners, stand up an infrastructure very quickly. Some of my colleagues call it kind of push button, get banana type capability where you can deploy infrastructure as code, and within hours you have a fully functional infrastructure in the cloud, which has been STIGged and is about 80% done for your ATO capabilities to get you up and running quickly. The other areas that we're working on with DISA is things like Stratus, which is our private cloud. It's a VMware-based capability. We've deployed that CONUS, and we've also deployed it in INDOPACOM, and we are pushing it over to Europe here shortly. We've also worked with our DISA teammates to develop our OCONUS work. And I think this is my last slide. So finally, what we've been working on over the last couple of years, and maybe not too long, but is really to push commercial cloud capabilities OCONUS. So what we call that as our joint operational edge. So we have worked with, I would say, at least 2. We're working on all 4 of our CSPs to provide capabilities at what we're calling the operational edge. So this is at your core headquarters type capability, where it is a direct feed back to CONUS. It pushes these cloud capabilities farther to the edge, where folks can connect their tactical edge cloud nodes directly into this, and they don't have to come back to CONUS. So we have already deployed this capability out into INDOPACOM in a few locations. We're working on EUCOM and AFRICOM at the moment, and we expect to have this as what we would call global fabric. all interconnected and capable to provide commercial cloud capabilities from anywhere in the world. So with that, I know it's pretty high level, but Alan, I'll turn it back to you unless there's any questions. Tim? Thank you.
You guys have a great artist there at CIO, whoever did those slides. Okay, today I'm going to be talking about APIs, and we're looking at it today from a different perspective. Typically, when we talk about APIs, we're looking at it, just how they can enable, let's say, like AI, but not necessarily the interconnectivity between like AI and big data. So let's go to the next slide. I said it. There we go. So this is the agenda here. I'm just going to skip over it. It's not as complex as it looks. As Jim was saying earlier, the diagram here, you see the blue box. That's the software modernization SSG, and that's where we collaborate with the CIO and ANS. And under the software mod SSG, not shown on this deck here, is an action officer work group. Talked about in the first bullet there. And so the action officer work group is like the worker bees for the software modernization SSG. And so what we did is they create all these tasks every year. So we do about 2 years in advance. Right now we're doing, I think, FY 25, 26. We're looking ahead. But what we're doing now is Alan and I work on the Tiger team, the API Tiger team. Alan leads it here, and I do all the in the trenches work for him. And we divided it up into several tasks, and that's basically the technical guidance, which is what we run, and Alan supports, leads. And then there's also ANS who does the contracting, and together we worked on the API manifesto. It's on its second draft, I believe. So let me see. There's also, I wanted to say that, we're really trying to take this data-centric approach, follow the CDAO's approach with the 5 data decrees and whatnot, and also take it a step further with an API first. And also this has overlap with Nadine Geyer's presentation about MOSA, because the APIs in software support a MOSA capability. So, okay. So I'm going to go through a few slides here just about the challenges. If anybody has any questions, feel free to speak up. But the major problem we see with the APIs is that, it's interoperability with our systems out there. They don't use APIs necessarily, or if they do, they're proprietary. So there's all kinds of issues with interoperability. So that's one of the big things we're trying to get after. With the AI, you're going to see that there's this new thing called API or AI APIs. And so that's a real big thing right now. And so APIs are really, their kind of scope is expanding as we go here, as the AI is coming up with the large language models and other models. So let's go to the next slide. One of the issues we see, I'll just go through the bullets first, then we'll go back to Fulcrum. But we see these issues. I won't read all the bullets, but a lot of the programs will kind of sap their program to try to get our, as an oversight body, OSD, we do ITRAs and things like that. I think somebody mentioned that earlier. They'll sap their program or silo it. And so it's not as visible, and they don't have the interoperability across because it adds complexities. For Fulcrum, in the Fulcrum strategy that was released, there was a mention of APIs. So APIs is a big part of the Fulcrum, one of the lines of effort. I think Juan showed those 4 lines of effort, and it's one of those 4 lines. I think it's 2, number 1 or 2. So we go to the next slide. And so in the DoD, this is kind of, when we look around, we kind of pull all the programs. We work a lot with all the programs, so we have a very good understanding of where they are. And this may be a little dated, but these are the things we've seen over the last 5 years, where everything's ICD driven. There's no discoverability for integration. They have limited adaptability to support AI/ML without major revisions and rewrites of their applications. And it's very monolithic. We see that basically they do what's called modules, but then they use tight coupling. So if you want to do any updates, say to something that's in theater, you have to send the whole package again. You can't just replace, say, a module or something like that individually, because it's compiled into the application. And the other thing is zero trust. Zero trust is a very big, new thing that's come out. And so we're trying to use the APIs to really support the zero trust as well. That's security is really a big thing. And we have people that are using like real-time systems. That's something we're addressing now in our next release of our guidance. But, we're still looking into see like, say, UC2, which is one of the data protocols they use, which supports REST. And so we're still trying to figure out the standards on that and see how they interoperate. So, all right. So this is a good slide. We've seen these big systems. I used to work on an ACAT 1D system called TMIP-J. It's a medical program system out in theater, and we have databases here in CONUS. But the problem is they're spending, I won't tell you how many millions, but say almost 100 million probably by now a year just to maintain it. And the problem is it's too big to fail. And basically they did the dim sum to try to replace it, but it didn't really replace all of it. It replaced some of it. So we have to start thinking different. And I think some of the other presenters talked about this as well, about we need to, look at this from the acquisition, the RFP period, all the way through to the contractor award. So, okay, go next. And so for standards, I know we were talking about standards earlier. That's kind of the theme here. We're looking at OpenAPI 3.0, I believe is the version, to help with the standards. There's also a security standard called OAuth, or version 2. I forget what 2.1 or 2.2 is what they're on now. And then the if anybody can guess the icon, the green icon, what that stands for, there's a prize. It's I think it's Swagger, but OpenAPI used to be Swagger. Swagger actually developed into OpenAPI, so they still keep that. And so these are some of the benefits that you'll see if you're using the OpenAPI standard. So when we're developing APIs, we want to develop the APIs using the DevSecOps. So we're like kind of eating our own dog food with the software modernization recommendations. So we think that's a very good way to go, because it's going to basically, make use of the software factories. The microservices architecture within DevSecOps lends itself to APIs. So they're already using APIs in many cases. And so they can also collect the metrics. And I heard one of the speakers up here earlier talked about their SDKs and libraries that they put out. That's really good. That's a high maturity, basically level of effort if you're doing that. And then also the APIs need a governance body. So you have to really, if you're doing APIs in your program, you have to establish governance. And I've heard some other talk about that today. It makes me happy that it looks like that's being considered. Okay, so the twist here is that we're looking at big data, we're looking at AI. These are two emerging technologies. And previously, when we were doing APIs within our group, at least, we weren't open to that view, that perspective. And so today, I think we're really focusing more on the APIs being the connectivity between not only the AI itself, and by that I mean the machine learning and other capabilities to expose your AI. Basically, like right now, if you have ChatGPT or other large language models, you can typically get to those through an API, and you can build your own application versus going through the chat interface on the website. So let's see. So basically, the APIs enhance integration by those bullets there, acting as the nervous system to enable the big data, the AI models, secure communication, data exchange, and enhancing discoverability, which was a gap. Okay, so this I just put up here as an example of some of the AIs out there that have APIs that you can integrate with. The Nipper GPT, I just added that one on. That's a new one. It's in beta, I believe, right now. Just released. It's on the NipperNet. And if you just go to nippergpt.mil, you can get there and apply for access to that. It does not have an API yet that I'm aware of, but I just added it in here for your visibility. So the top one there is basically Llama, was the probably prior to the Chat GPT version 3, that was probably one of the most advanced API engines out there. And then I don't know if you're familiar with Ask Sage, but if you look at Ask Sage, it's from Nick Shalon, who used to be the chief software officer of the Air Force. He's got that out. He just got it approved, I think, ATO'd, I thought he said, for use on the NipperNet IL5, and he's working on IL6 now. And then there's Gemini, which is the Google API. And if you're not familiar with Hugging Face, it's a big website. It's a community, basically. And on there, there's 500,000 curated data sets you can download and get started with AI right away if you want to take that dive. So, okay. So why does the DoD need to adopt APIs? And that's basically here to improve security, scalability, data integration, as I mentioned. We want to satisfy the MOSA. We also want to improve AI and ML capabilities. And then one of the things I did not mention is that we've been, from pretty much the very beginning with the API Tiger team, we basically formed a really tight bond with Joint Staff J6 and their support. Basically, they wanted us to make sure that what they're doing and what we're doing is aligned to the CJADC2 vision. So we're working with them. We actually are doing a data summit with them twice a year, and the CIO and other departments participate in that. So I think I mentioned the next bullet and the last bullet. Basically, we're on a journey here, and we're going to see fruits of this API work soon. Okay, I put this slide in. It's basically a page out of, or it's a slide out of our API technical guidance, and just to show you what an API ecosystem looks like. So these are the characteristics you're likely to see. Hopefully you can, oh yeah, it's a lot bigger here. So yeah, so basically that's the API ecosystem. Basically you have a consumer, producer, and they work like that. Sometimes it's bidirectional, maybe different flows. So the next slide. And this is the proof, sorry. This is proof that we have an MVCR or an API technical guidance document. We took a screenshot of it and put it here. And we basically, I think, is the MVCR one, did it get signed on the website yet? Yeah, so it ran a little late. We were expecting to do July, but there was some hold up on that. And we just signed it, got it, or Tom Sims signed it, I believe. And we were just waiting for the URL. They're in the process of publishing it. And then we're working on the MVCR2. We've been working on that since, I think, April or so. And that's planned for release in October 2024. So let's go to the next slide. And so one thing through our work with Joint Staff, they also got us involved with NATO, because NATO is going to be very important in the CJADC2 effort. So we're working, Alan's leading bi-weekly meetings with NATO. And this is their outline, their initial outline right here, which you see. And I don't know if you all are familiar with NATO. You've worked with NATO. I hadn't. It was a very rude awakening. It's like every country has their own opinion, and it's very challenging. So my patience is now much improved now that I'm working with them. So go to the next slide. So the path forward, with this is we're just going to continue to solidify this. We're going to continue to update the technical guidance as needed on a pretty much 6-month cadence. That's our goal. And so we're going to try to put out a policy soon. And that's this technical guidance. Once it's got a little more legs to it, that's going to be what's going to go behind Fulcrum and also the policy that the CIO is going to publish. So yeah, we have to have a word cloud slide. And I actually wrote the code to create that, if you're wondering. So the open API implementation, basically, we use open standards. Even with SOAP, there's standards there, but it's, a little dated. But right now we're focusing mainly on SOAP. In our latest MVCR2, we're actually going to be writing about real-time system integration. So it's going to have a little more flair there with these more complex APIs. And so with that, I think we are looking for new members. We're always looking for new members. We're up to, I think it's about 120 members right now for the API technical guidance team. But under the API Tiger team, we actually have, I think it's like 300 total. But we break off in subgroups under that. So with that, do we want to open it up for questions for everybody? No? Okay.
Sure. So I've got a few canned questions here, but while the topic is in everybody's mind, please, are there any questions for any of our panelists?
Yeah, just a couple comments on the API piece. Having worked on an API management program for DICIO for a couple years, I found it was like the most understood concept, I think, with people. And just a couple points I wanted to make was, for anybody who's kind of uncertain about, I guess, APIs and maybe thinking about the necessity of them, because that was an issue that I think got brought up when I was on that program. No matter what you build, it's going to have an API. So it's either going to be a good API or it's going to be a really bad API. And one of the great things about these standards, like Open API standard, and then using tools like Swagger, is not only does it make your APIs human readable, but it also provides an interface for people to actually interact with that API without having to build a system to interface with that system that that API sits in front of. And the really, really great thing about that too is now a lot of modern frameworks and libraries like Fast API will actually automatically create that documentation and a route for you to hit that API documentation in that human interactive format. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of throw that out there because it's getting really interesting with these different tools that are being built out in the open source community. That's it.
Yeah, thank you very much. It does seem to make a lot of sense when we first briefed this to our R&E leadership. The response we got is, why aren't we doing this now? And my response was, well, we all have to do things differently, apparently. Long ago when I was a software developer, everything was ICD driven and you couldn't change anything. And it was, yeah, there were API-ish, but my boss would say, you're not funded to develop something for that other program. You're funded for this set of requirements. So that hurt my head for a long time. So I'm finally getting some revenge. But thank you very much. And yeah, it's, if you have time and you'd like to join, we'd love to have you join the group and contribute, because what we're finding is there are a lot of people out there doing great things, right? And communicating about how they're doing them and how they're solving problems, right? And there's a common thread to a lot of their problems. So once they communicate, we document, it becomes kind of a consensus. And so there's a lot of interest, and we're grateful for that. So please stop by before we go and give us your contact info, and we'll load you up with work.
So one of the other environments for IT systems and data standardization standards is the legacy IT standardization program, DISR. And just wondering, how you all are utilizing or relating to that environment as well.
Is this on? Okay. So I worked I worked at PGITIC on a it was basically a prototype program back around 2013. And we used the DISR. It saved us. Basically, we didn't know what to do for the API integration. And we found that the CIA and the DoD had jointly developed an API, which you probably know the name PRISM. And they had published the standards about how they did the security for it and everything. So we actually used that to get started. But I think that was prior to anything really solidifying out there, and that was noticeable from us. So I'm not sure if anybody wants to talk about Swagger. I'm not sure when it emerged, but it was after that, I believe.
And either last cycle or this cycle, we're putting Open API on baseline in DISR. So we're looking out after the API work. It's Ted.
Like, who is that? That's Ted. Ted's works in our group. He's big support. So thank you, Ted.
Sorry, Mr. Stark mentioned FedRAMP, and I love the idea of reciprocity, but seeing it actually work is the hard part, right? So do you see how we can kind of tear those walls down so that not just FedRAMP, but like anything can be, accepted that was developed by the Navy and then go work on the Air Force and that kind of thing?
So So in a lot of our working groups, we're working on things like continuous authorization to operate, right? So CATO. So we have a big push with CATO to really think about how we are changing the paradigm for this kind of old way of RMF and CAT or ATOs, and really kind of modernize that system. So we're doing that with our software modernization, software factories first. We're working really closely with the Navy and the Air Force to certify their DevSecOps platforms to be CATO. And so that when applications come out of that process, they're already approved and ready to go. The CISO for DoD CIO just signed out a reciprocity memo as well. So we should, if there are issues where we've dedicated ourselves at CIO to be able to help with those problems. So if the department is running into reciprocity issues and saying, hey, listen, we've already certified this system, it should be able to be used in the Air Force and the Army, you can come to CIO, we'll help adjudicate that issue and help push that so that the reciprocity is considered first.
Similar to that vein, within the 5G cross-functional team, we were congressionally mandated to develop a provisional authorization for 5G technology. So that's something that our pilot phase is pretty much almost done and should go into effect in FY25. What it'll do is it'll take the technologies that we first developed and worked with industry over the last 3 years to put it through the process. So to your point, it actually makes it easier. So if you are going to purchase this 5G technology, it's already been authorized and already gone through the process once, and so you don't have to do it again. So this is something that we're taking in and actually will be in effect starting in FY25.
All right, so I wrote down a kind of a softball question I thought would be good for to work across the panel. One is in terms of 5G standardization, kind of a couple of questions. One is, how are the standards going to be crafted to knit across our multiple domains? Any thoughts on, when you're talking about air, sea, space, cyber domains that we'll have to deal with? And also sort of the 5G strategy for APIs. Is there some thought of allowing for APIs to access the back-end features or the front-end features of 5G services across their 5G infrastructure?
So I'll address the first part and you can address the second part. As I was alluding to when I went through our discussion, we actually have representation from all of the military departments. So, and we partner well with NSA. They're embedded within the cross-functional team as well. So with regards to how are we ensuring that the standards meet that, we're actually taking use cases that have applicability across all of the departments to ensure that as we're pushing forth not only the need or the gap that exists within one military department, if we can elevate it to the enterprise level, take that technology gap, and then go through our standard strategy or the standards process that we look through, that's where we're ensuring that, to your point, it is something that is applicable to all domains. So that's from a military department perspective. With specific to NSA and security, we are working, we're aligning with them. One of the things that we're pushing through in a memo that should hopefully be signed out. And for everybody who knows memos or processes or policies in the department, it takes a long time. But we do have a memo that's coming out that is taking a look at the existing standards. Thanks. Taking a look at the existing standards and the different security requirements that were once optional. What we've done is within the department, as we were looking through lines of effort 1, 2, and 3, worked with industry to tell them, yes, these may have been optional at a point, but to ensure a certain security level is met and baked in for our requirements, both at a NIPR all the way to TS level, that these are now become mandatory. So this is something that we're pushing through as well. But again, what I want to highlight here is things that used to be done stovepipe or when one person or organization was driving it. We're actually having a coordinated effort across the board. So these were things that we looked with within the departments, that we looked at their networks, whether it's a private, public, or a hybrid, and looking at the different security domains that were required, and then working with industry to hear from them. Is this something that's going to cost the end user a lot of money, or is this something that at the end of the day, it just makes sense to make mandatory? And that's kind of how we've taken a strive in making those different kinds of contributions and changes to standards. So I would say definitely you'll start to see that come through. Hopefully, fingers crossed, in the next couple of months, at least that memo signed out, and then those standards start to change in release 20, if I'm not mistaken. Everybody wants to go to happy hour 6. Everybody's quiet.
Okay, I just, one other thing in terms of standards for cloud adoption, obviously with all the different vendors using different underlying technologies, right? Containers have become an important way of addressing that. How are we addressing that within software modernization?
So, I mean, again, we have put that at kind of the forefront of our processes, especially for our software factories. And what we do is, in particular in CIO with all of these capabilities, not just containers, or we've actually spent quite a bit of time in the last week speaking about containers because of the increase in VMware prices. So everyone is kind of riled up about VMware right now. I won't go into that. I won't go into that right now. But so, it was kind of what we brought in was, hey, we should be looking at other options. What are other capabilities? Containers have been brought up. We have Iron Bank, which is our container repository. He's shaking his head back here. He knows. Probably work with those guys. We've also, we also have a container as a service over in DISA. So being able to provide those capabilities to the department, make sure that they know that they're available for use, that they've been, reviewed, they've been approved, that they're part of that approved list and are available for use across the department, I think is really a critical aspect of making sure that folks can use whatever is in their toolbox, right? And that's what we've done with cloud in general is, like, we're not forcing folks to use cloud, but it's another tool in your toolbox. Like, is it available to you? I want to make sure that every technology that we have available to our service members are at their fingertips. And that's been our big push for CIO.
So I think each of you mentioned working with our NATO allies and partners. And first question to Mr. Ramirez is, is it too early, or have you collected any data metrics on how that working in parallel with 3GPP and NATO instead of in serial, like the benefits of that, and any Are you seeing the development of the standard to its adoption and implementation? Are you seeing any gains there? And for all three of you, any thoughts and best practices, recommendations for those that are working with our NATO allies and partners in standard?
So as far as seeing metrics and actually seeing it go from cradle to grave, I haven't seen it yet. Like I said, we just started. What will be the true test is at the end of September, we have we'll be in Budapest, and we're actually going to collectively address and start looking at contributions. And I can probably report back then. But what I would say now, it's a great agile process. A lot of it, though, comes down to the ability to not only be technical, but also be open. Probably say I get 3 or 4 emails almost every other day. So at least from my perspective and working with NATO, it's a lot, but you have the results of a community that is interested in pushing technology that has a common goal for all of our nations. And so seeing that collective piece of it, at least it's inspiring from that perspective. What we're seeing, though, it's some specific nation will say there's a question for 6G. It's what from the US perspective is going to come forward, or what are we pushing? The ability for us to tap back in to work with our future G office and R&E and figure out what is it the new technology that's coming, push it back through the process through NATO, and have that chain from an industry perspective as well as from the Ministry of Defense. It's there, it's live, it's present. So at least now I can say you'll start to see stuff come through. The cumbersome process will be just like, as I alluded to with the policy from DoD-CIO, it's a long process to get a STANAG approved. Within NATO, it's much more developed. They're trying to take advantage of the fast process that we have within the department and trying to mimic it, but it's not standardized yet. So the actual endeavor is a 3-year endeavor for this experiment to see if we can push through STANAGs faster. But I think, and Luann kind of shake your head yes or no, but we've had one go through pretty fast, the STANAG, or it's in the process. So, but if you have all the right players, which it seems like we do, I'll be able to report back and say that it's worth it.
As far as cloud goes, I can tell you that first off, there's policy in place in NATO that says that there's no NATO data in the cloud. So we gotta help them change that policy first, right? They are very interested in cloud. They have over the last year. First, we spent some time just getting them to understand that you can actually work in the cloud. So that was kind of the first big hurdle with NATO. They are sort of all in now with getting onto cloud. We just signed an LOI with NATO with 22 countries to really get into the clouds. We were going to do an MOU as well to stand up a working group with NATO to really get through the technical portions of that. I think my biggest concern is cybersecurity. We haven't seen any metrics, so to answer your first question, they're not in the cloud, so NATO is not there yet. But between maybe a few of our allies, their cyber posture is where it needs to be. But for most of our NATO countries, they're nowhere close to the cyber posture that we would need for them to connect to our cloud environment. So there's a lot of work that needs to go into it, and there's internal work to do with NATO. They're going to look to us as the leads for the United States, as we are probably the farthest along when it comes to cloud adoption. So they're obviously going to look for us for that technical capability, technical experience. But we're going to kind of have to drag a lot of the NATO countries with us when we go and say, listen, this is going to be the minimum standard for you to connect into these systems. So that's a couple of years away. We're not quite there yet. Just getting kind of our hands wrapped around on what NATO really wants to do when it comes to the cloud. But they are, it's definitely on the horizon. They're working their way there. So I'll have to report back to you in a couple of years. So sorry.
For APIs, there's some semblance of standards. However, that was not a requirement when they built out a lot of their systems. So And the other issue is that one of the fathers of that API, who created the API, is in our group. So, we can't call his baby ugly, but I did recommend that we take his API that he's developed and we actually try to document it. And then we try to recreate it using standard processes and see if that would work. Because he's convinced that it has to be proprietary. And like, like the gentleman back there was saying that, they don't believe APIs are going to do anything for them necessarily. But it's very complex. Their situation is much more complex because their system design was complex when they built it, I guess. So.
I have one last one.
Okay.
Sorry, if that's okay.
Please.
So we've talked about efficiencies, like economic efficiencies a lot this week. So from the CIO perspective, do you think we've ever been offered too many tools? By that I mean, org A can be on Teams, org B can be on, Atlassian tools, for example. And so I don't see anybody developing an API to make those talk to each other anytime soon. Is it better to get everybody on the same ecosystem? So things along that line.
So, yeah, we have an embarrassment of riches in a way, and the sort of the benefit and the curse of commercial packages, right? And how you integrate. One of the things I found is probably anecdotal was when I was in the IC, there was a group that decided very suddenly that the requirement system they had to migrate off of it quickly, and they migrated into a very complex system that's far more than requirements. I won't use the name here, but it's a big commercial package. And 2 years later, they decided we have to get out of this. They had 2 months to get out of it and go into doors. Well, the problem was that they basically smashed their data. They'd really broken a lot of the structure that held their requirements together. And so I think more than any tool, right? Because tools are transitory, right? If one of these gets sold to the wrong country, it's going to be verboten on our networks, right? So how do we deal with, how do we preserve the data, right? That's one of the things that when I was working on a program called DIS. If anybody knows what DIS is, I was in the PMO, and that was replacing what was called the CATS, the Consolidated Clearance Adjudication Tracking System that used to be used by the folks up at Fort Meade to track clearance adjudications, investigations. And the new data structure was so complicated, so different than the previous one, that there was an entire project to manage data migration between the databases. And there was no backwards, right? Once you moved a set of data, say Air Force CATS was moved into DIS, that's it. The old system was done because there had to be continuity. And I think one of the things we have to think of with tools is beyond the tool itself is the underlying data. We're going to see this with Cameo, with all of our digital models, is we're increasingly relying on that. How do we protect our data, right? So the day you buy a tool and you start installing it, you have to develop a plan to preserve your data because that tool is leaving. At some point, it's going to leave for one reason or another. So I think that's maybe the thing is we've got different tools. How do we make use of the APIs that they've got? The other concern that we have in the API initiative is proprietary APIs. What happens if, as we've seen with, for instance, Cameo, we start to see a tightening and a changing of API licensing rules? What happens when we're heavily into a product and we're using that? So part of the API strategy is to really think ahead of that. How do we make APIs abstractions partly, right, so that we can abstract away these proprietary links? So if there's an underlying proprietary API, fine. But what we have to have access to the data that's critical. I think I heard that in the previous panel, the data that's critical to our operations, because again, the software is going to become deprecated, could be bought, company could go out of business. We've seen all these kinds of things. At some point, you're going to have to move that data to another tool, right? How do you do that? And I think that's probably where APIs can help create an abstraction layer, right? That allows us to move between those without impacting the consuming applications, right? And you can have some independence between the two. I don't know if that answers your question.
Kind of what I'm hearing is that part of the trade-off is the mobility aspect, and So we're kind of trading a little bit of commonality to have the mobility. That makes sense. So appreciate it.
So I guess we're concluding here. So I was asked by a special person. I said, you need to have, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. It's all very interesting. Thank you so much. It's Michael. Yeah. Michael, you kind of opened yourself up to this one by putting up that one slide with the AI engine. Since it's not really a technical question per se, but and it's not specific to APIs, but do you see the engineering community as a whole? I won't put DoD on the hot seat, but do you see the engineering community as a whole veering towards certain AI engines over others at this point, now that there's a lot of competitors to ChatGPT?
I can speak for Ask Sage. When you use Ask Sage, you get to pick between about 125 different algorithms you want to use. With say ChatGPT 4.0 is one of them, and even with ChatGPT, you can pick between the different algorithms. There's not as many; it's their own ones. But whereas Ask Sage, it's Nick didn't write the algorithm, so he puts all the algorithms there, and you can pick which one you want to use. I think with everything's going multimodal too, and those things, those like say Midjourney, for example, that's one of the ones I use. I believe you can pick its algorithm too. You can tune it based on some of the algorithms have better capabilities at this, some worse. They have a real problem with words in their images, and I think for Midjourney they've eliminated, but like DALL-E, it'll actually pick up words from your prompt and stick them in the image sometimes. So yeah, we're still getting there. I think it's developing. Yep.
Okay, so I had a special request for some humor at the end because it's been a long day and I guess everybody's been sitting here. So just something I read recently that in the Star Wars universe, they're about to introduce a new droid character. And apparently this droid character takes the long route around to anywhere, right? Even if there's a short route, it goes far out of its way. It's going to be called R2 Detour.
All right. Thank you, Alan, and all the panelists. And thank you, everyone, for the engaging discussions today. Tomorrow, we'll be back for day 3 and hear from the DEPSOs, from some of the DSPO staff, and have a Q&A town hall. So hope you have all have a good evening, and we'll be back here. Let's see, and make sure I get my day right this time. Day 3, 08:30, opening remarks.